little boy, but I felt compelled to watch it as well because those misfits really wanted to win those battle of the bands, to the extent where stage roofs would fall on them. Like there was some danger in these shows. And I saw this amazing documentary on YouTube about you where you said, well, I couldn't make them, kung fu fight each other, but I put some emotional drama battling, and you throw in those misfits. Let's go all the way back. How does Gem and the Holograms come into your life?
So I had been working for Sunbow Productions, which was the production company that had the deal with Hasbro to make the G.I. Joe series. And so I had been writing for G.I. Joe. And so consequently,
Cool.
I had gotten to know the people, at the top at Sunbow, who were just a wonderful bunch of people and terrific to work with. And so they really liked my writing a lot. They loved the stuff I did on G.I. Joe. So they got a new deal with Hasbro for this line of dolls. And because it was female oriented, they called me in and asked me if I'd be interested in developing it. And at the time, my career in animation had been hard action, pretty much hard action. I'd been writing, Spider-Man and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and G.I. Joe. And so I remember thinking it was terribly girly for my taste, but nonetheless, it was a really great thing to be offered. So obviously I said yes.
Awesome.
And she was originally called M, and they discovered that they couldn't really copyright a letter of the alphabet, and that wasn't really working. So she became
tell that
Jem.
tell that to Taylor Swift, but please continue.
So she became Jem, and names kept changing. They had some prototype dolls, and I had to fight really, really hard just to see what they looked like so I could get a visual sense of the characters. And they kept changing who was playing what instruments and the names of the characters. And M became Jem, and she had other names like Morgan and Misty, and then she became Jerica. And, all these names kept changing during the whole process. In fact, my earliest scripts are still in the old names. and you were talking about the fact that there's action in it, and that's because I was first hired to write these 15 short segments that were only about 6 minutes long each. And they were sandwiched in a half-hour show. It was either called Super Saturday or Super Sunday, depending on where it aired and what market. And it was like a boy-oriented action segment, then Jem in the middle, and then another boy segment at the end. And they were different series, and I didn't pay much attention to what they were. And so they were really worried that the boys would change the channel when Jem came on in the middle. And so consequently, they were like, yes, it has to be fashion and romance and glamour, but it's got to have this action so that the boys don't change the channel, because they were convinced that boys controlled the channel at that point. So, which they probably did in those days, but
not at my house. I had an older sister.
So,
she had she had carte blanche of what was happening on television.
I'll bet.
I had to wait until she had friends and left the house, and now it's time for me to watch Jem.
So the odd structure of the first what became the first 5 half hours of Jem is that they were originally these 15-minute segments, each one ending in a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So it created this kind of interesting but odd structure for the show. And in fact, when they did take those segments and turn them into the half hours, there wasn't quite enough material. And so I ended up having to come up with like little bits and scenes and extra stuff that they could then add to actually pad it out to the half hour show.
Okay. Wow.
Now some of the history behind it is that the toy concept itself came from a very well-established sort of advertising executive and toy designer named Bill Sanders. And he took it to a couple of people named Barbara and Joe Hyland, who also worked with Hasbro a lot, developing toy lines. And so he came up with some of the original concepts of, Rock Band, holographic computer, secret identity kind of a thing. And but when they took it to Hasbro, it ended up being turned into a girl doll line. And so it sort of morphed into that. But when it came to me, all I had were product names, which, as I said, kept changing. So product names meaning like Jem, Pizzazz, Rio. In fact, I think Pizzazz and Rio, I believe Pizzazz and Rio were the only two characters whose names never changed. And then everything else I got to come up with myself. All the setup, who they were, what they were, how they interacted, the whole setting of Starlight Music and the Starlight Girls, all of that stuff I got to come up with. I got to come up with the main villain, if we want to call him that, the protagonist, Eric Raymond, named after my brother.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. He loves it.
Yeah, what was funny about him on the show, it's like, she in her secret identity, she's not just like, oh, I don't know what to do. She's like, she runs an orphanage. And she's put in a position. She's gotta take over the record label, and needs to create a band to maintain control. It's a really cool concept for a show. But the bad guy on the show is just so funny because he's just such a dick. And it's kind of, life's easier when someone's just a dick. It's just easier to be like, screw you, screw that guy. Everybody else, it's easy to know who a bad guy and a good guy is when someone is just such a dick. So did your brother say, hey, thanks?
He thinks it's a lot of fun. He
Okay.
came to one of the Jem conventions many years back, and
Okay.
he walked in the door and just sort of did the Eric Raymond persona, just enjoying it completely.
That's amazing. So, okay, my friend Kathy loves this show so much. She sent me a bunch of questions, and I am going to read you them. But one that I remember offhand was that were the Misfits like inspired by more like 80s heavy metal hair bands like the Motley Crue or anything like that? Because those Misfits were cool.
Well, not from me in particular, no. What I was going from was the general instructions of the kind of shows they wanted done. So there was that. Of course, I didn't know what their music was going to sound like until later. I had a look at what the characters look like, of course, and it was just more a matter of developing characters that would work well as a foil against our good girls.
Yeah.
It was just more a matter of that because the music came along later. The music wasn't done up front.
I just like to say it's kind of funny that in the theme song, their first lines are, "We are the Misfits. Our songs are better." It's like, I'm like, what are they, Kanye West? Like that's quite a brag. So Jem and the Holograms having a girl power rock band rap battles apparently in the 1980s. I really did appreciate the animosity because I used to be in bands, and we have a little friendly animosity. Like our friends would get T-shirts, and we're like, yeah, well, no, we had T-shirts, and our friends would be like, well, we should get T-shirts. They have stage lights. I'm like, well, we should have stage lights. We don't have stage lights. Okay, pop rocks and confetti it is, but animosity is healthy. Yeah, we all need everyone to act like jerks every now and then to remind us that we're not ones. Something amazing about Jem and the Holograms that I always really liked, I was saying before, is that kind of the danger you would put in there. But you mentioned in this documentary I saw you in that you weren't allowed to make them kung fu fight. So you put like emotional battles in there. For instance, Jem in her secret identity cheating on herself with the guy she likes. And my sister always wanted to know about the situation with the love triangle that was placed between these three characters, but more like two characters. Can you explain to me the origin and the inspiration for that love triangle?
It was just something that just happened as I was writing the series. It just seemed like a fun thing to do. There are a few things that work as well as a love triangle, and when you make it really off the wall, like she's competing with herself, there's just so much you could do with that. There's so much fun behind that, And she's a little bit schizo. admit it. And that just gives you, as a writer, that gives you a lot to play with. There's a lot you can play off of that. And then I also lean towards, well, okay, fine. Why wouldn't she just tell him the truth at some point? And I thought, well, okay, there has to be something that's in the way of her coming clean, and that something is that he has a bad temper, and she knows that he just would not forgive her for this, and that she would absolutely lose him in both identities.
I,
So
yeah.
that's more powerful than a physical threat. That's an emotional threat. That's a threat of the heart. It's a threat of losing happiness and losing someone you really care about.
Yeah, plus Clark Kent did this crap all the time, everybody. I mean, come on. Superman, Clark Kent, yeah, there was some love triangles there, she, Lois Lane couldn't make up her mind either. So, there you go. Um, you were mentioning before about Marvel, and everybody will get into your Gem and Holograms questions in a bit, but I wanted to just get back to. I just wanted to get back to. Sorry, everyone. I just wanted to get back to the part where how you came into this, because I heard you once say that you couldn't find any characters that you really identified with in comic books, which is a world that you came from as well, and you used to draw Robin as a girl in your issues, so you would have someone to relate to. I thought that was so cool. And would you mind telling the audience about that, about growing up and your inspirations to create these female characters that would one day rock the screen for all to love?
Yeah, you got to remember that I started reading comics back in the late 50s, early 60s, when the comics were pretty radically different than they are
Yeah.
today. A hell of a lot less sophisticated, for one thing. And it was hard to find really smart, clever female characters to identify with. I was really into Lois Lane. I had lots of Lois Lane comics, but depending on who was writing her, she was either this really smart, clever, reporter, or she was this completely jealous dipshit. I was just like stupid as all crap. So there was her and Saturn Girl and the Legion of Superheroes I really liked because, again, there was somebody who wrote her as a really smart leader type of a person. And then later when I found Marvels, there was Jean Grey, Marvel Girl. I really liked her. But again, when she was first written, she was written in a pretty soft way. And so it was a little hard, a little frustrating, trying to find characters like that. And so for a long time, I was feeling like I wanted to grow up to be Batman. Probably
Don't we
because
all?
of all the characters, he was the one that didn't actually have superpowers. So I think it was like something you could maybe even remotely aspire to. But the two things really tripped me up. Number one is I couldn't do gymnastics. Hopeless, could not do them. And when I started researching criminology and, crime fighting on a realistic scale, it was all G-men with emphasis on the men. There was no room for a woman in that world anywhere.
Yeah.
So about the closest I could come to it is I would just take a ballpoint pen in my Batman comics, and I would put long hair on a skirt onto Robin and turn and little boobs and turn Robin into, and I did it with not only Robin, I did it even with Aqualad in the Aquaman series. So
May I ask you a question? In the 80s, Frank Miller would make one of the most famous Batman comic book series called Batman The Dark Knight Returns, in which Robin is a girl character named Carrie Kelly. Now, when this came out eventually, did you feel like Nostradamus, where you're just like, hey, I've been drawing Robin as a girl since the 60s. Where's my check? No.
No,
Yeah.
it was just a kid thing. I wasn't really thinking so much about the character because the comics at that time, those particular comics
Yeah.
were pretty shallow and pretty silly. And what Miller was doing was just, a whole different world. It was a whole different approach.
Yeah.
Just didn't bear any relationship to the kind of stuff that I grew up on.
You started working with Marvel. Was it the new Fantastic Four that you worked on with Herbie the Robot, or was it the one with Johnny Storm?
Yeah, it was that one.
With Herbie the Robot? Excellent. I got the right picture.
Yeah,
Woo!
they couldn't use the Human Torch for some strange reason. I can't remember if it was a legal reason, but one reason I was given is that they were terrified that kids were going to see the Human Torch on television and then try to set themselves on fire to emulate him.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I thought that the little robot was pretty dumb.
So you're not the creator of the robot himself, are you?
Oh, hell no.
Ah, nice. I didn't think so. I've seen too much of your writing recently. I'm like, no way. Herbie would have been a second female character in the Fantastic Four and not completely like useless. But actually, no.
Well,
Everybody, let's throw that out there. There should be maybe two boys and two girls in the Fantastic Four. I think that'd be actually kind of awesome if you got to change things up. But yeah.
well, there was this thing that was prevalent in animation at that time, really early on in animation, where they seemed to think that they had to have like some kind of a little funny animal character or something along those lines.
Oh, yeah.
Some funny little character for comedy relief or something. I'm not sure what. So in Fantastic Four, they had Herbie, and then when we did Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, we were forced to have this little fluffy dog that had to be in there, and it was, and it just came down to the people who were developing these series just for some reason thought you had to have that element in there.
Speaking of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, can we get into how you came aboard and I believe you worked with Stan and you guys came up with the Starfire Origin?
Yeah, I was already doing, since I had been writing the Fantastic Four, I had written the Fantastic Four for DePatie Freeling. And it was DePatie Freeling that Stan had his first deal with, that he was making the shows with. And then later it became Marvel, when DePatie Freeling shut down, it became Marvel Productions. And so I already had gotten to know Stan from working with the Patty Freeling people, and I'd actually done a bit of development work. Like they'd had me do some development work on various characters that didn't end up going any further. And there was they even had me write an X-Men script for an X-Men series that never went anywhere, like really, really early on.
Wow.
And working from an outline that Stan had. And so Stan would often throw out lots of different ideas and so forth. And so at any rate, when we got, I can't remember which came first, whether it was just there was a Spider-Man series that I wrote for, and there was also Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And I've now actually forgotten which came first.
I believe Spider-Man came first, and then this was the second Spider-Man cartoon after the late 1960s one where he can swing from planes and clouds because he was always very high above the roofs. And then Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, I think, was a spin-off of that because they're just like, hey, let's give Spider-Man some pals. And
yeah,
that's super.
Real typical.
That's super cool. So her name was Firestar, correct?
Right.
Starfire.
Yeah, and
Firestar.
I did end up collaborating with Stan. I think Stan has a lot of ideas. Stan is someone, he was a fire hose of ideas, and he could throw out lots and lots and lots of different ideas. But yes, I did get to develop that and do that episode.
Okay, and it was a cool origin story too because. Yeah, you know what? We were saying this before we went on camera, but I think you're like that magic touch that if there's a team of people and they're really not giving the girl her just desserts, like she's just kind of there saying, "Okay, guys," like you'll come in and you get. I saw this in this documentary on you that in G.I. Joe, you gave the character you wrote her where she goes home to see her family and they're all a bunch of ninjas and they all attack her and you think, oh man, they're attacking her. It's like, nah, man, this is the way they roll. And that's why she's such a good fighter. And similar with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, instead of just being like the girl on team, now after that episode, the more you know about a character, the more you care about a character. And I think you're like that magic wand that just comes in and fixes those problems in a cartoon.
And I think I'm lucky that I got to do those things,
Yeah.
it's because I was working with people that allowed me to do them. And
Mm,
that certainly is a large part of it right there.
of course. So we have some clips of Spider-Man and his amazing friends playing. What would you say pre-Gem and Holograms was like one of your favorite projects to really write, where you just like, you're like this one's the best because I can pretty much do anything I want to do.
Hmm. I'm not sure there was one. I mean, I really enjoyed writing Spider-Man stuff, and I really enjoyed writing Spider-Man and his amazing friends. I mean, and G.I. Joe, I loved. G.I. Joe was wonderful. I really, really enjoyed that. For one thing, the person I worked with, who was my story editor, was Steve Gerber.
Okay.
Steve Gerber became a good friend and a mentor, and he was just wonderful person to work with. And I loved the G.I. Joe stuff, writing that kind of action adventure. I enjoyed a lot. And, I pitched ideas that they let me do, and they let me do these two-parters, which I love doing the two-parters because you can delve more deeply into things. And so that was everything I did for Sunbow was just a wonderful experience.
So when you got the project Gem and the Holograms, and you had been working in animation for so long, kind of writing characters that have already been established, especially in comic books, for years and years, and all of a sudden you can create all this lore. They say that success is preparation meeting opportunity. And do you find like Gem and the Holograms came at that right time, where you're just like, I've had ideas for stories for years, and now I can put them all into fruition?
Well, I don't know if I could say that really, because Gem was not something I would ever have thought. Okay, not a million years, but once I jumped into it and just started coming up with ideas and started developing it, it just all flowed. It was like the perfect storm of creative talents all came together on this thing. Art and voice and writing and just everything all came together. The music, just something about it was magical, and it clicked and it came together. But I discovered that I actually really, really liked writing this kind of material, which surprised me. I didn't expect to. And yet, if I should have probably expected it, because if you look back, even on the G.I. Joe stuff I did, it was much more character oriented.
Yeah.
And it delved a lot more into the characters. It wasn't just a bunch of action beats. And so it does make sense that I would enjoy that with Gem. But, I didn't know that it was going to be something I'd be really good at. And then when I finally got into it, it just felt great. And there was a lot of creative freedom, and just everybody seemed to enjoy what I was doing. And, you can't ask for much more than that.
Of course. And it's and speaking of like character development, I gotta start playing this clip right now. It's there's this show that I liked so much because I was obsessed with Power Rangers, and this show came before Power Rangers. In fact, arguably one can say that it took a lot from Power Rangers, and it's called A Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. Now, all you Gem and the Holograms devotees out there, we will speak more about Gem, but it is very rare to be able to talk to a writer about a series that is the ultimate cult classic. Now, could you tell me about your experiences on Captain Power? Because I think the series is just... It's just a what the F about, we'll swear later, but it's just a what the F of it's like a genre blender where it's like there's a little bit of Star Wars in there, a little bit of Star Trek, a little bit of Battlestar Galactica, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but at the same time it stands on its own. It looks a little corny, but the subject matter can be so dark. Like there is death, there is it. Please tell me about Captain Power. I'm talking too much.
Yeah, well, I mean, that it was based on a toy line from Mattel.
Okay.
And so it was as was very, very common in those days, a series was developed with a toy company backing.
Yeah.
And it was going to be extremely unusual in that it was going to be the first use of CGI, computer generated images, at all, because it was actually designed, the toy that they created was actually designed to interact with digital fields and digital images on the screen.
Yeah.
But what really made this show amazing and unique and gave it the depth that it had that you're talking about was Joe Straczynski, also known as J. Michael Straczynski.
Who is one of the best comic book writers. Yeah.
Well, he's a great comic book writer, yes, but he was writing animation at the same time I was, and so we got to know one another through the animation business, even though we didn't work on the same shows, but it's a small field, and we all got to know each other. And so then he got this live action series, the Captain Power series, and he wrote up like short story premises, like maybe a short paragraph of a story premise, and he would hand those to the writers, and that's what we would work from.
Yeah.
But Joe Straczynski then went on to create Babylon 5. Create it and write almost every single episode of it. So
wow.
If you look at Babylon 5, I think you can see why Captain Power turned out the way it did, with the kind of unusual amount of depth and gravitas that it had. And that really gets down to Joe.
Yeah. In research for this interview, I was looking at your website, which is, I believe, ChristyMarks.com. Is that the website? I Google it.
Right.
Yeah, ChristyMarks.com, and it lists all the cartoons you have written on, all the live action shows, features, etc. And so after binging a bunch of Captain Power, there wasn't enough time to finish the whole series, but I did go to the episodes that you wrote, and in one of them, I believe, sorry everyone, I'm terrible with names, but it's something to do, it's called the Gemini something, and the character, Pilot, she, this really delves deep into where she comes from, because she's not just the pilot on the team. She is a former member of the army that is trying to invade Earth. That is kind of merged with the machines and has forgotten their humanity, and are completely programmed to think the machines are the Lord's, and they're still going to do the Lord's dirty work, if you want. And it's kind of like Terminator, if people are just like, hey, those robots? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's fight with them. and of course that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in this series. So I'm just wondering, did you bring that to the table where you're like, okay, she's a former member of this bad guy army, or was that given to you and they're like, okay, now give it some depth?
Oh yeah, no, like I said, I mean, Joe had this stuff worked out in his head. The back. He developed the series, so he developed the characters and knew what he wanted as a background for the characters. And then, as I said, he would write up about a short paragraph premise of a story idea, and then hand those to the writers to work with. And so that was what I had, was a premise that indicated that she was going to go back and deal with this aspect of her past.
Mm-hmm. But in his I guess in his paragraph, he mentioned that she finds kind of like a mirror image of herself, a young blonde woman who is completely that she has to like pseudo take hostage, and try to convince to leave with her. I'm sure that was all part of the premise, but
I don't actually remember whether it was or not. I got to be honest with you. I don't know.
Whatever. Had to ask, but
I don't think. Unfortunately,
mm-hmm.
I no longer have any of my paper files because my house and everything I had was destroyed in the campfire.
Oh no!
And all of decades worth of scripts and memos and paperwork and everything that I could have looked at to tell me that. I had all that in my files, and it all burned to ash. So, Unfortunately, I no longer have that information.
Okay, well, at least you have your stories, and everyone watching right now is so appreciative that you've taken time to come talk to us. during a strange time in the world, and make us forget a little bit about reality, so we can just look to the past and be like, wasn't the '80s awesome? um, okay, so with Captain Power, I believe we exchanged on Messenger that you wrote a 5-part. In the second season was supposed to happen, and it didn't, and you wrote like a 5-episode arc for it. Can you tell me about learning how the show got canceled and possibly what you were writing in that arc?
I mean, it was awesome. I actually got to write the entire 5-parter before the show was killed, and it was called The Archers.
Okay.
And in it, at the end of the first season, I don't want to have too many spoilers for people. You might want to plug your ears up now, but Pilot dies.
Wait. Can I just say something about Pilot dying?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a young kid who used to rent a VHS of Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. I'm not sure how many episodes were on it. They just did that back in the day to get more ratings, and it worked. But they would play Captain Power very late at night sometimes, I believe on YTV and other stations. So I was falling asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night to the scene of Pilot saying she loves Captain Power before blowing herself and the base up. Now, I got to tell you, as a little kid who's used to Disneyfying everything, and there's always like, no, she didn't actually die. I had to deal with what I was seeing, and it was late at night, and I so naturally dreamed about it. And then on YouTube today, everybody, I am telling you this, internet, as research, because I wanted to talk to you today, I rewatched that scene and teared up because I understand the gravitas way more about what human sacrifice actually is. But please tell us about what happened. I just had to embarrass myself on the internet first.
Yeah, it's funny because that really happened because the actress didn't want to return for the second season.
Oh, okay.
And so, they gave her a wonderful going away party. So in the 5-parter, The Archers, yeah. I was picking up like immediately after that, and they have acquired a new female character.
Okay.
That is not really a part of the team. Kind of like stuck with her, but she's not really taking the place of Pilot, and there's a lot of tensions about that. But she's this very cheeky, cocky kind of female character.
Yeah.
That was being added to the show, and so they trying to remember what her name was. Let me see, what was her name?
Take your time.
Anyway,
the internet is learning. Okay, we have no one else. You are the only one that will tell us this. It's okay. You can say her name was B. Arthur, and we'd be like, amazing, whatever.
Name was Chris.
All right, there you
go. I should
go.
Remember that. You'd think I'd remember that, but anyway.
Yeah.
They are escaping, and they get shot down into a territory that is unknown to them, a different territory, the power team.
Yeah.
And they encounter these sort of like high tech Robin Hood kind of characters. That's why it's called The Archers. And so they get embroiled into a whole series of adventures with this new character, Chris, sort of integrating with them and going up against the usual bad guys and so forth. But it was definitely a lot of fun to write. But what happened was there was a person, and this was also something that happened a lot in that time period and still happens.
Okay.
Talk about cancel culture. This was real cancel culture because this asshole went on a mission to destroy the Captain Power series because he just thought it was somehow horrible, terrible, bad, not suitable for children, what have you. And Mattel, being a toy company, they kind of backed out of it, basically. They didn't go up against that. And so this crusader managed to kill the series.
Hey, buddy, 30 years later, eat it.
Mm-hmm.
I gave the finger to the camera. You can't see this, Chrissy, but I did it for Pilot. Yeah. Oh no, not 2 Pilot, everybody. 4 Revenge, because she never got her revenge. All right. So we talked about Captain Power, all this stuff. I got to bring up a series that is super cool and that I inadvertently named my rabbit after because I had heard of this show, but not. and then watched it later. Bucky O'Hare is such a cool show. Can we talk a bit about the wackiness that is Bucky O'Hare? Because that in the early '90s, after Ninja Turtles, I believe the term is anamorphic.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, where all these anamorphic animals that kind of knew karate in space just came out of the woodwork, and Bucky O'Hare was one of
Yeah.
them, but stood on its own based on its greatness and that theme song. Could you tell us about working on Bucky O'Hare?
Well, it was a comic book series first.
Oh,
So it was created by Larry Hama, who also did so much of GI Joe, and Michael Golden, who's a terrific artist. So they created those characters, and I just recently, like by recently I mean like yesterday, I happened to be doing some research into something, and discovered that Larry had actually designed those characters to be toys from the very beginning, because
okay.
at the time getting toy deals was important, and they were published by Continuity, which was Neil Adams'
Yeah,
publishing
yeah,
comics
yeah.
publishing company. So Neil Adams is the person I actually worked with. He, I was hired and I worked with him to develop it into an animation series. So I just worked from the comics and what existed, but recrafted it to work as an animation series, and tried to keep that really funny, cheeky kind of ironic, cheeky tone that it had, as much as we can when you're writing something that's supposed to be for kids.
Yeah. But I thought it was great because, well, first of all, I'm going to pull up a little picture here, everybody. Is that the kid in the show looked exactly like me when I was about 10 years old. Like
Ah,
maybe a little blonder. He's kind of a blonde Harry Potter. But I thought I thought it was really cool. And I love the fact that the bunny was green. And I know that
and
sounds like
the
such a
duck has four arms.
yeah, exactly. I know that sounds like such a stupid point. Like, oh, the rabbit was green. But green happened to be my favorite color. The kid looked like me. How could I not like this show? But my favorite part of the theme song, it goes like, and a funky fresh rabbit. And like, I'm like, yes. That is exactly the greatness that is early '90s that we will never get again. Um, so Bucky O'Hare, that must have been a great time. Do you have any funny stories about Neil Adams to tell? Because Neil Adams is a heck of a storyteller, and I'm sure he must have some stories about himself that you witnessed and you go on and tell other people.
Ah, boy, you're talking to a person with a really terrible memory. And I mean, I remember that I liked working with Neil,
Nice.
that I enjoyed it, but I can't, nothing kind of jumps out in my memory. No particular weird or funny or odd sort of a thing. It was a nice job, and I enjoyed working with Neil on it. We had fun with it. And it was kind of a shame it only went to 13 episodes.
Yeah, 13 episodes, but I mean, sometimes I'll say this to everyone. Sometimes when you put something out in the world, you never know when it's going to be discovered. I mean, you mean YTV, like our numbers are they're good, but I have a feeling that the second I die, all of a sudden it's going to be 300,000 views. This show was before its time. One man was nostalgic about Canadian '90s and '80s stuff. And I'm like, where was all this praise when I was breaking my balls? Yeah, anyway. Well, today's about doing funny voices for no reason. My roof is leaking, people. It's brought on some insanity. All right, we got to get back into these Gem and Holograms questions because people have been waiting patiently, and I got to, I got. It's all about the audience, Without the audience, like, what's the point of doing all this? So, just queuing up a photo here. And yeah, before I ask the questions and stuff like that, what made you say like, hey, Jerica, she should, or Jenica, but I'm terrible with names. What part of her alter ego did you say she's got to be like a great person? She's got to be like a rich person with a heart of gold. The whole the orphanage, everything. How did that come to you?
Well, she's your hero character. I mean, especially when you're writing animation for kids, there are a lot of restrictions on writing animation for kids. They have to have good positive role models, and that's why you see a lot of, and did then also, you see a lot of ethnic diversity in your good characters because they want good role models. So you naturally are going to gravitate towards making your characters good characters with a heart of gold, because that's just what's expected. That's what you're going to work with. In fact, there came a point where the show didn't really divide into seasons so much as into toy doll development seasons. But what I tend to think of as season 2 is when Hasbro decided they were going to add dolls to the line, and they added another doll to the hologram line and another doll to the Misfit line.
Yeah.
And so when they said to me, "Oh, you're going to get to do this other character for the Misfits," and I said, "Oh, great! There's no diversity in the Misfits. Can we make her black?" And they were appalled at the very notion. You absolutely could not do that. You could not. They're the bad girls. You cannot have a bad girl be an ethnicity. It was just like considered an absolute no-no.
Okay.
Which I thought was ridiculous, of course, but that's the way it was. That's how they thought about things. So that is the medium you're working in, and so that's how it goes. You want a good, strong, positive role model for your hero character.
I have a comment right here from someone named Stephanie Cook, and she says, "Glitter and Gold is still a song I know the words to. My sister and I grew up on Gem. Thank you for the wonderful show. I'm sure you've been asked this, Christy, but what are your feelings concerning the recent movie update? Is there a recenter movie update, or are we referring to that trash fire that happened a few years ago?" Well, I don't know. Let's talk about.
I think she's referring to the live action movie. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that happened without any input from me at all.
Okay.
The day before the press releases were going to come out about the existence of the movie, I got a call from someone at Hasbro who I think that someone suddenly realized that maybe they should let me know about this. So yeah, I was pretty unhappy. I was really unhappy about not having any input on it, and the fact that they didn't come to me to write it or anything of that sort. I did end up becoming friends with John Chu, the director, because he contacted me also, and he did ask me for input, but the script was already written. It was done. It was a done deal, and there were things I would strongly have advised them not to do, but it was too late at that point. But he's a good guy, and he was very, very sincere about what he was doing, and I liked him a lot, and that was the reason I ended up letting him talk me into doing a little cameo for the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was Jem. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was kind of like a female version of Justin Bieber, and it wasn't really Jem. It didn't capture the essence of what Jem was, and I think that was the big mistake that they made with that, and they lost their audience because of it.
I think the movie Josie and the Pussycats reminds me more of a Gem and the Holograms movie than that movie did, actually. and everybody on the internet, this is not Christy Mark saying this. This is me. So not animated series of Gem and the Holograms creator saying this. This is Ryan Stick in Montreal, Canada, who bleaches his hair blonde still. When I just saw a trailer for Gem, and I was kind of like, I'm not even a diehard in and out fan of this, but I know something's wrong. I'm just kind of like, but if the Misfits aren't in it screwing with them, then who cares? And the whole point is kind of being, without being the millionaire with a heart of gold and the dual identity. It's just like, oh, I don't want people to know who I am, so I'll put on a wig. That's not the same thing, people.
Yeah, it really isn't. That's what I'm saying. It just did not. And I think a lot of that probably, I'm guessing, but I think a lot of that probably came from Hasbro, because I kept hearing the term grounded being thrown around. They wanted it to be more grounded, which really says to me they did not understand their IP. They did not understand what appealed about the IP. They wanted to make it, somehow more realistic. I guess maybe they mistakenly thought that would be easier for a new audience to buy into, but I think they were just completely wrong about that. Because I have hear all the time about kids now who love the show, who discover it now in their childhood and who love it, even though it's horribly dated in terms of fashions and technology and everything else. Nonetheless, the stories still work, and there's a new young audience that enjoys it.
Well, we have to remember, and sorry, this sentence will make me feel a little old, but the '80s is started 40 years ago, and now the '80s has its own identity. The same way my generation looked at the '70s when we were growing up, where we looked at that '70s show, where it was almost kind of like a fairy tale time where everybody's hair was a little longer and they wore bell bottoms and and flowery shirts. It's when I look at when I look at Gem, I don't think it's dated as opposed to it knows its place in history. And if I were to make a Gem movie right now, let's say I'm a producer and I have all the money in the world, I would get Elizabeth Banks to direct it, who did great job on Pitch Perfect and all these other musical films, and I would set it in the '80s instead of being embarrassed by where it comes from. I would empower it. I would have it based in the '80s because shows like Stranger Things, people love the '80s now. It's been long enough away from the '80s when they're not where it's its own time. Like I looked at the '70s, that magical bubble of time that you want to step into, and the '80s was bright
Yes,
and
yes.
colorful, and the songs are great. They're still great. Do you have a favorite song?
Let's see. I've Got My Eye on You. I liked a lot.
Nice.
It's been a while, so it's
Yeah.
hard for me to remember all of them. There were a number of them early on of the early on songs that I liked a lot.
I just got to say, everybody out there, I haven't had a chance. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll do my best to get up to all this stuff. It's hard. It's hard maintaining a show when you're a one-man crew wearing a leather jacket and a heat wave and dark sunglasses. But the show's the show, everyone. What I do want to say is that my friend Kayla, your show is the reason why she picked up a guitar, and she played in a band for years and years. And the reason why she played in a band is because she watched Gem and the Holograms. When her dad got home, she begged him. She's like, "I want a guitar. I want a guitar." And so that's amazing because you didn't inspire her to go put on a wig. You inspired her to go change her life. You inspired her to go learn a skill that she never unlearned. And that's amazing. What's amazing about animation, all these shows, is that when an animation can install change in someone, whether if it's learning a skill or a morality tale, I think that's why shows are so important, and the quality of shows should always be maintained. That hey, just because people might be watching now, but they might be watching forever. So let's do the best we can. But anyway, I just need to tell you that story because Kayla is a near and dear friend of mine, and she rocks the stage, and it's all because of Gem. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I've mentioned that there are Gem Cons,
Yeah.
and I've been to many of them, and I hear wonderful stories from people about the way the show impacted them, the way that the show, in a lot of cases, helped them get through a tough time, just helped them to survive. In addition to people who were inspired to go into creative fields, and I just love hearing those stories. It just means so much to hear that from people.
Have you ever heard of a story that's like a real tear jerker? Because all the voice actors that come on the show, they tell me that people come up to them and they're like, "Oh man, this one time." But if one comes to mind, would you mind sharing?
There have been so many. I mean, there's probably more than I could ever remember because I've had so many people come up to me and hug me and they're crying or, they're just overcome with emotion because the show meant so much to them. And a lot of these are people that were, gay or trans or, had other things going on in their lives that were really difficult for them. And the show spoke to them and helped them to cope and get through a childhood that was probably very tough. There were a lot of those kind of stories.
And you have so many shows that you've worked on, so many amazing shows. And I'm glad that my mashed potato brain finally remembered this. But not only did you work on Beast Wars, Beast Machines. Everyone go to our website, see which episodes. I believe it's the Transmetals one.
Transmutate.
Transmutate. Is that the one where Cheetor gets really scary for a little bit because he's changing into something he doesn't quite know yet?
No, it was fun because the thing about that series, it was one of the early series that was done in CGI at a time when, it wasn't super easy to do CGI, and so consequently there was a rule for pitching story ideas was you couldn't create any new characters. You had to just use the existing set of characters, and that was it. But I thought, well, I might be able to stretch this rule, break this rule a little bit if I said, okay, they come across this newly created character, and it's just made up of bits and pieces, parts of existing characters. Like you just grab a piece of this 3D model and grab a piece of that 3D model and put it together and create this sort of Frankenstein monster, basically, of a transformer.
Okay.
But they loved the idea so much that they actually ended up creating a brand new 3D model for this one-off character.
Is this Silverbolt? Is that
no Transmutate? Transmutate is what she was called.
Oh, Transmutate is what she called. Okay, just making sure. But that's super cool. Wow, that's super cool. I love hearing that. We have a big the audience of this show really loves Beast Machines Transformers, but everybody out there, they love Reboot just as much. And there is two characters that you had a significant part in writing and bringing to the screen. I'm not sure if they gave you the premise beforehand or whatnot, but there is a certain episode of Reboot, and I'm going to pull up the picture, everybody, that happens before the episode where Enzo, who is now the Prime Guardian of Mainframe, loses a game. And it's in a Mortal Kombat type situation, and he gets beaten up, and right before he's about to get vaporized and the game's over, he turns himself into a game sprite. And I'm watching this, and as a kid, and once again, a sheltered child being like, what's going to happen? And then in the next episode, who would emerge than the Enzo Matrix becoming one of the biggest badasses, and he just goes by Matrix. And this episode icon, and Andrea is grown up, and so you see these two people that you've known as kids for a few years in these episodes, and all of a sudden they're adults. Could you tell me about writing icons? Because that was my favorite episode, because it came after the episode that traumatized me. So this episode made me feel better.
I loved writing those episodes because I loved the characters that they handed me. I mean, obviously they knew what the characters were going to turn into. I mean, I didn't come up with that, but it was such a shift. It was such a change away from the previous tone and previous feel of the series.
Oh, yeah.
And I just loved it. I had a wonderful time with those characters. There was such juicy characters to play with. And Andrea just had tons of attitude. And it was just really fun stuff. And of course, working with the Reboot people was really great, too. I liked them a lot. And was working with Marv Wolfman and Len Wein, and some really great people that were working on that series.
Len Wein, everybody, the creator of Wolverine. Just remember that. Len Wein is like one of those great guys that deserves to be on one of those Mount Rushmore of comic book creators, but probably won't end up on. But the comic book creators, the comic book fans, they know what's up. Len Wein's a god, dude. All right.
He was a wonderful person. Just a dear friend and a wonderful person.
So I believe we should get back to the Jem and the Holograms questions, because my patient audience is, unless you have any funny tidbits of Reboot you would like to share.
Let's see. They actually flew us up to Vancouver.
Okay.
So what was really cool was I got to see Vancouver. I'd spent some time in Vancouver, which I really enjoyed a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Beautiful city, and they treated us very nicely up there. But it was just a wonderful camaraderie on that show because we all knew each other. Marvin, Len, and I, and had known each other for ages, and so there was a really nice sense of camaraderie on the show, and we were doing really cool, interesting stuff, and there was continuity to the stories, and the CGI was just spectacular on that, and War Planets too. I really, really liked, or in Canada, I think it was called Shadow Raiders.
Yeah, Canadians are scared of the term war. Like Beast Wars was Beast Machines. I don't
Yeah.
know what's up with that, but it is what it is, everybody. But yeah, Shadow Raiders. I have not seen Shadow Raiders, but my audience loves it, and they keep bringing it up all the time. And then when I finally saw it, I'm like, oh wow, it looks like Bob on steroids. Like it's that's really interesting that you are like you're like the Kevin Bacon game of CGI of CGI Canadian shows. Because you've been on all of these. Like I know the voice actors dance back from them, but really to write each one of them, and especially such meaningful episodes, especially that Icon one. I mean, everybody loves Matrix. I know a dude that has a Matrix tattoo, full buffed up Enzo Matrix tattooed on his arm. That in turn has muscles as well. Did they kind of?
I could show you pictures of some pretty spectacular gem tattoos
There you go.
that people have shown up with.
There you go. Right before we jump back to Gem and Holograms, when it comes to Enzo and Matrix and all that stuff, how much input did you get to put into like his new attitude? Like he's instead of being the happy-go-lucky Herbie the robot, except as the little brother, he kind of reminded me of the little brother in Speed Racer that would run around with the monkey and just get everybody into trouble. And then all of a sudden he's just like pretty much could light a match on his like on his face, and Andrea all of a sudden is a woman, like not a little girl,
Yeah.
she's a woman.
Uh-huh.
Was a lot of that preconceived before you wrote it, or did they say, hey, what do you want to do with this?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, obviously they told me how the characters had changed. I can't remember if there was much in the way of pre-existing material, or whether. Let me hang on a second here.
It's all good.
Uh,
Got a little shot of Enzo and Bob when they rediscover Bob, who is voiced in season 3 by Ian James Corlett, who's also Cheetor on Beast Wars and also the original OG adult Goku on Dragon Ball Z. Little tidbits of information, people. That's why you watch You and Me and
so
TV.
I see that I have some notes that somebody must have given me from. It might have been even Marv, but in the notes that they gave me. It says here, Matrix must come across more like Snake Plissken of
Nice.
Escape from New York, much less verbose, picks his words sparingly and carefully. And like you set up, you never know when he is kidding. By contrast, Andrea is wearing her heart on the sleeve for the whole world to see and is ever playful, especially with Matrix. Lastly, we want to play out Dot thinking Enzo is dead and resolve it in the next show. So we can see it, but she won't. More separation between characters of Backup and Dongle. So anyway, I just have a bunch of notes that were given to me based on what I had written.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's still cool that you even told us, like, based on Snake Plissken, which explains the iPad. Well, it explains the one eye. But
Yeah.
wouldn't it be kind of cool, everybody, in Escape from New York or Escape from LA, like Snake Plissken comes and says a bunch of badass stuff, and then his very attractive female companion walks in and just goes completely, completely taking the piss out of him when he takes himself too seriously. I love those episodes so much. I love all of Reboot, but I love season 3 so much because the stakes were so high, and it wasn't just a game coming in. It's just like I can't miss an episode. That whole like the search to find Bob and the pirate ship, all of that. My friend Marlon and I still talk to him. We've been friends for 27 years, and I just remember calling him much on our little rotary phones back then, and and just being like, "Oh my God, did you see Reboot tonight? Yeah, Matrix is huge. Matrix is huge." And then they're gonna find a pirate and all that stuff. Like it's just so wonderful. And the fact that you wrote icons is just that's the part that really got to me. Where I'm just like, wow, you could write any episode of Reboot, but the first of the next step of the series that is pretty significant. I'm so happy to be talking to you today.
I have. I think basically what we did was we sort of had like writers' meetings because I find here a note that it was from December of 1996, based on some of the writers' meeting and notes that I took. I had suggested to them, I don't remember whether they did this or not, but I suggested that Matrix's cybernetic eye should have different modes, so that he had a rest mode when it just looks blank, but then a battle mode where it turns red, and a berserker mode. And I can't remember whether they ever did anything with that or not.
Yes, they did.
But
When he had to like aim, his eye would turn around, and I think it's an M, and then it turns into like a W, and it's really cool.
oh, cool. Well, I have a that was my suggestion. So there's a lot of notes here about how the whole series was changing, and all of the stuff about what Bob changes into, and what the web writers are like, and
That's
there's
so,
just a lot of notes on this, of how everything in the series was going to change.
wow. Because yeah, prior to this season 3 you're talking about, they were on ABC Saturday mornings and had so many limitations. And I'm sure that once the kid gloves were pulled off, they went all out. They're like, okay, we're gonna make some serious serialized television with cliffhangers and to be continues and all that. And that's when I really got invested. That's when I would run home from school and be like, can't miss this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun looking at these notes. I forgot that Dan DiDio worked on this too.
Wow,
Yeah.
all these comic book greats that are all working on these great Saturday morning cartoons.
Well, I knew Dan DiDio from ABC because I was hired to develop a series called Hypernauts, and Dan DiDio was the ABC executive that I worked with on that.
Wow.
That was before he went to DC.
All right. So back on that Gem and Holograms chain that everybody wants me to be talking about. Hey, everybody. For those of you who are just joining us, I am joined by Christy Marks, the creator of Gem and Holograms, the animated series. And it is such a pleasure to be talking to her today. She's already told us about working on incredible shows such as Reboot, Beast Wars, Captain Power. Everybody, if you just are joining us, you should consider rewinding it because you get some notes about the canceled second season that will never come to fruition, so it's very nice to know it now. I have some great questions from my friend Kathy, who is a gemaholic, and I would love to bring this up. I would also like to give a big shout out to my friend Liz. She runs a music review website called Bucket List, and she loves Gem and Holograms, and we're just all at it, doing the best we can during this crazy time, trying to entertain the troops being you. And Christy, it is so nice that you came on the show today to generously giving your time to just me and the audience to just, shoot. I'm trying not to swear. We were talking before we started. We're like, are we going to swear today? I'm like, maybe. I'm trying. I'm trying not to, but it's giving me a tick. All right. How much? We already asked about the Misfits. What made the characters so relatable? Sorry. Okay, Jem was super influential, more so than most 80s drama high school empowerment cartoons. Were you expecting it to be as big of a hit as it was?
No, actually, I don't think I ever really thought about it. It was really just more a matter of let's make some really cool stories. And I think that's true for pretty much all the writers. You're just trying to make really, really cool stories, and you're not sitting around worrying about whether it's going to be a big hit or not, because this was also during the time of syndication where you routinely could do 65 half hours.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of a different world, and we pretty much knew we were going to be doing 65 half hours, which is one of the reasons I tried to put so much complexity into what I developed, is because I knew we had all of these episodes that we had to do. And so I wanted to make sure there were plenty of characters and plenty of material, which I think we had more than enough.
Lots of complexity. She also said, I read somewhere, a costume designer was hired to for the clothing. Is that true?
I wouldn't know.
Ah, there you go.
That's Hasbro. That's Hasbro.
There you go. There you go. If they, if they said it, if they said it, especially in the pilot, she knows it. Everyone. All right. Do you think Jem would hold up today? I believe we kind of covered that. If they, do a deep dive into the '80s. Here's a fun question, Christy. The movie came out. It is what it is. We already talked about that. But if they were to make a Jem and the Holograms movie now, is there a young actor or actress that you think that, or living, or how? Sorry, backing up. Is there an actor, living or dead, you think would have been an amazing Jem and the Holograms cast?
Oh, I'm not a very good person to ask that sort of question to. I don't pay a lot of attention to who's who today. I'd have to sit down, do some research, take a look at who's out there. I thought that the young women that they cast, all of the way, were musical, could play instruments and were musical. I mean, I thought they were all fabulous. I don't think there was any fault of the actresses that they hired at all.
Of course not.
I think really the problems were entirely separate from them, and I thought they did a great job, and they were just delightful young women.
Awesome. I just realized that YouTube is playing an ad right now. Sorry about that. Just gonna go on me. This is gonna go on me there, everybody. Okay, so sorry. Thoughts on the movie? Okay, no, we are sorry, everyone. We already talked about the movie and all that kind of stuff. Also, Kathy also says she's the reason I wanted to play guitar. That happens a lot, everybody. Well, I got a few of my own Jem questions and stuff like that. Do people ever send you pictures of them wearing Jem and the Holograms Halloween costumes? Not at a Jem.
Oh yeah.
Not at a Gen Con.
Yeah. Lots of them.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a few years back, I went to a Comic-Con in Denver.
Okay.
And I think no less than 5 gems came up to me during the course of that convention because they knew that I was going to be there. But yeah, and of course at the Gem Cons we do a costume contest at the Gem Con. So yeah, I've seen some absolutely fantastic versions of the Gem characters. The Gem Con this year, by the way, was going to be in Minneapolis, but because of C-19. It has now become a virtual con. So, I will still be appearing virtually in some way for that Gem Con. So, people might still want to look into that.
For everybody who's just joining us right now, make sure if you ask some questions and I did not see them, make sure you ask them again because I've been trying to go back and it won't let me. So that is that. But we are having a great time. A little off topic because all we've done is talk about your career, but is there a particular what music do you like? You wrote a show that's such about music. What do you put on the old turntable?
When I have a chance to listen to music, like when I'm sitting at my computer, I basically go to a station on the net called Radio Paradise.
Okay.
And they have a couple of different mixes. They have a world ethnic mix because I really like lots of different kinds of world and ethnic music. And they also have a mellow mix. So I tend to just go there and listen to whatever they have on, which is quite a wide range of music. But, my previous, now destroyed collection of music, I had a lot of world music, ethnic music, flamenco music, Irish and Celtic music, which I particularly love because at one time I used to play the Celtic harp, a brass-strung Celtic harp. And I have quite a weird eclectic range of stuff that I like. I mean, I had a whole shelf that was just nothing but medieval and Gregorian chants and Hildegard von Bingen music and really interesting medieval stuff. And I loved, Dead Can Dance was great, and Voss, VAS, and a lot of really interesting female vocalists, and of course I was hugely influenced by Joni Mitchell,
All right.
and just enormously. And Lorena McKennitt, I love Lorena McKennitt's music too.
Amazing. I just found my questions from my friend Kayla in a text where I had to go back about 500 times, and I'm really glad I found it. Since the show aired in the 80s and that era is far less open-minded than the present day, have you received any pushback about the show's feminist ideals? Well, that's a heavy-handed topic, but
I would say not at all. No,
no.
I would say just the opposite. Actually, I think that. I think those.
Oh, I think maybe back then. Sorry, I read it wrong. I think back then, did anybody give you any like pushback about the heavy-handed ideals and feminist voice that the show had?
I don't think there were any heavy-handed ideals or super feminism. I think it was just a show that was about a bunch of really wonderful, strong female characters. And nobody had any problem with that.
For sure. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Aw, this is very nice. It's like, do you even know how much the show has positively influenced young girls like myself to believe that anything is possible if they work at it? Well, that's lovely.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Oh,
that's definitely in the theme of Jem.
okay.
Something that definitely goes along with Jem.
Here's another good one. I gotta do this because YouTube keeps screwing me over. Do you think Debbie Gibson? Do you think Debbie Gibson was musically influenced by the show because her music it has quite a similarity to Jem and the Holograms? Well, wouldn't that be interesting to be able to ask Debbie Gibson about that?
Yeah, I wish we could ask her about that. I mean, there are certainly a lot of pop stars and musicians and people up there who are familiar with Jem. You see it come up. And I don't know if the whole pink hair thing was people being influenced by Jem or not. It's hard to say. You'd have to ask them, actually.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, bringing it back. PJ Katie, who is a well-known personality, television personality, and everybody who's watching the show definitely knows who PJ Katie is. She, out of the generousness of her heart, when she heard that I was going to interview you, she was like, I have a video somewhere of Beyonce and Destiny's Child and me singing the Jem and the Holograms theme, and I'm just like,
oh yeah,
what? So we put it. So with her permission, we put it on my YouTube page, and it's quite amazing because what I love about that is that it goes to show no matter how famous someone is in this world, they're a fan of something, and there's a good chance that they're a fan of that thing that you like, and just because you're a fan of them doesn't. Everyone is a fan originally, and why I bring that up. What are you a fan of? We talked about your music, but in general, like, what are you a fan of?
In general, that's a big question.
Well, your go-tos. Let's say if they say, "Hey, Christy, what do you like? You like movies? You like TV shows? Are you a fan of a writer? Are you a fan of a certain person? Like, who would you line up for at a Comic-Con, I guess?"
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I do a lot of reading. I love to read, and I'm very much into the whole fantasy genre. And a little bit the science fiction. That's what I grew up reading, and I grew up reading comic books. The whole. I know it's hard to say because there's just so many good people out there, so many good writers. I'm mostly reading books these days, novels and so forth. And I love Patricia Briggs. I love her series of novels. The Dresden Files. I've read all of the Dresden Files. So I'm more of a fantasy-oriented kind of person, I'd say. And when we sit down to watch TV, we're generally watching more of those type of shows. Like right now, we're really into Warrior Nun. It's just an amazing series on Netflix, and we've been binge watching that lately. It's just really well done, which you wouldn't think from the title necessarily. The title is a bit a bit misleading, shall we say, but it's a well done series, really nice. So anything that's in that sort of realm of fantasy, science fiction, urban fantasy, all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
Big
amazing.
fan of that stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, and my friend Kathy has brought up Gaga was influenced by Jem for sure. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure dual identity, rock star name, lots of wigs. Well, last time I checked, Jem and Holograms never rocked a meat suit, but I'm pretty sure Gaga somewhere down there probably really like Jem and Holograms. It's
I would not be surprised.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to do something I haven't done at all this entire episode. I'm going to go on YouTube and see what people are saying because I've been a little overwhelmed with a lot of stuff. And by the way, everyone who's just joining us right now, we are interviewing Christy Marks, the creator of Jem and Holograms, the animated series, and a writer on such other amazing shows as Bucky O'Hare, Shadow Raiders, the Canadian version of the war title, as usual. I don't want to take up all your time today because you've been so generous with it, but I'm just double checking to make sure that there are no lingering questions because I would feel terrible if that was the case. What's the funniest question anybody's ever asked you about the show? Can you, does that come to mind?
Funny question.
Well, because some people take these shows really seriously, like super so serious, where you're just like, did you notice that in episode 6 that Jem looked at the other girl funny? Were they actually sisters? Like, I don't know, one of those.
Well, I don't know if I'd say it's the funniest thing necessarily, but I tend to be a little bit surprised at the amount of hate that Rio gets sometimes. It's like, wait a minute, Rio wasn't that bad a guy. Why are they giving him so much shit? You know, it's like I see an awful lot of shit for Rio that I just don't understand because I like him as a character.
All right, we are back. I look on YouTube and there is a lot of people asking questions. One of them says, I'm wondering.
Well, we're going to have to distill it down. Better distill it down to something here. Let's get down to like the last 3 questions.
Exactly. I don't want to take up all your time. You've given me so much time today. You are an amazing person, Christy Marks, and thank you so much for coming on the show. This is such a good question that I think it might even be the last question because it's so funny. I wondered why Jerrica, when she became the head of a record label in the first episode, she didn't just cancel the Misfits recording contract.
Well, that's why the Misfits ended up going with Eric Raymond.
Okay.
And they went and formed Misfits Music. They had to go, do their own music company. So they ended up going off and doing that.
You made them go independent. And the final question of the day, Christy, and it's just something I've always wondered. There is a band called the Misfits, a legendary punk band called the Misfits that back in the 80s were not nearly as famous as they are now. Did the show ever get some funny like letters or notes from saying like, hey, there already is a band called the Misfits? Is there
Later on I heard about that.
Okay.
I did not know about the existence of a band, of a real band called the Misfits at the time. I do remember that when I was first presented, the first notes I was given, they were going to be called the Ms. MS Fits.
Oh, that's cool.
The Ms. Fits, because Ms. had become a big thing then, and but then at some point or another it went back to being just the Misfits, and but I didn't know about the existence of the other band until much later when I found out from the fans. Actually, the fans were commenting on it, and I have no idea how they pulled that off, or whether Hasbro had to have reached some agreement with them or what. I have no idea.
Well, that is so cool that I finally got to ask you that because I've been wondering that since I was 15. That is awesome. Christy Marks, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody out there, look at ChristyMarks.com. Check out her check out her unparalleled contribution to the work of animation, live action television, and how important her contributions were to female characters that you loved in the 1980s. I mean, I saw this documentary. If you want to see a little thing that I saw, it's called Off Hollywood with Christy Marks. Off Hollywood. If you want to get even more details, look up those. Buy those Gem and Holograms DVDs. There's some amazing special features that you're all over. And where could people find you on the internet if they ever want to reach out?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned that I have a Twitter account that's just at Christy Marks. And then you're going to post the link to the Christy Marks Clubhouse that's on Facebook.
Absolutely. I believe everybody wants to be in that part of be a part of that Christy Marks Facebook. Christy, you are one in a million. You're a beyond talent, and it has been an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for calling in.
You're very welcome, and take care and stay dry.
I'll try. All right. All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. So that was Christy Marks. We're going to be posting the link in the link of this. It's called the Christy Marks Clubhouse. Everybody out there, I hope you had a good time today. I had a great time. I hope you had a great time. This was absolutely lovely, and it's been a strange day for me, but it's been a wonderful day since. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta go deal with some real life. So have yourselves a great day. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow Yumi and YTV, we have an Instagram page that needs more followers. And just at Yumi and YTV if you want to follow us on Twitter. And if you want to support that YouTube page, I believe we just crossed about 700 likes, or we're close to. So all that, we do the show completely for free. We get paid in we get paid in praise, and just a few like buttons, and it makes my day. Thank you so much, everyone. Have yourselves a great time. Not sure who the live guest is next week, but we're working on it. I'll see you.